I can't talk on camera right now. I don't know why. It's beyond me. Anyway, stick around and watch me forget all my lines. Hey you guys, B. Riley here. You can find me right over there on Instagram, and thanks for jumping in on the video. What we're going to be talking about today is how to refinish a guitar body, a bolt-on neck. Could be any bolt-on neck that you want. For this purpose, we're going to be using my Stratocaster, which has been kind of a work in progress for the last couple months while I've been using it off and on. So if you'd not seen episode 1 and you wanted to check out how we actually aged this Fender Stratocaster neck to be a little bit more interesting and appealing to the eyes, then go ahead and click on that. I'm going to put that link right over here. We're going to be working with my Sherwood Green 1968, 1967 transitional reproduction, kind of a tribute. This is actually a new old stock body. Didn't realize that when I bought it. Kind of lucked into it. Sometimes you just get somebody's good stuff off of eBay, and maybe somebody doesn't realize what they're parting with. But that's what this is right here. So what we're going to do is we are going to show you guys how to dull the finish on this and do a refin using Nitro paint, which is a lot of fun. And then after that, we'll go over how to lightly age it. Our objective with this is to make a closet classic. And what you would essentially see is you wouldn't see knocks and bruises and huge wear marks. You just see the subtlety of checking that you might see in a neck or checking that you might see on the body, slight wear patterns, very, very light stuff. Just kind of something that's a little bit more comfortable than new, but doesn't look a mess. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that today. And how we're going to get started is we're going to go ahead and throw this on the bench and start knocking the shine off of this with some 400 grit wet dry. So in the respective time, let's get to it. Okay, so before we get too far into it, let me tell you a quick story. Here's this kid, and he's about 10. And all he does is think of Fender Stratocaster guitars. He literally dreams about them. He listens to Buddy Holly 24 hours a day, finds out who Hendrix is, trips over Rory Gallagher, wanders into the Bloomfield era, and when he stumbles out of it, all he knows is that he wants a black Stratocaster, and if it had a big headstock, that'd be great. So somewhere in the ballpark of about 1992, my mom actually saved up all the money to go ahead and get me a proper Stratocaster, even though money was very tight. And as my dad was getting ready to get into the car to drive me to the music shop, where I went once a week to go stare at instruments that I could never possibly afford, my dad went back inside real quick to, I assumed, get the pack of cigarettes that he must have surely forgotten. He hopped back in the car, struck a match, put it in drive, and off we went. And when we were over at Sam Ash Music in New York, the one that's over in Lindenhurst, which I'm sure is probably still there, right across the street from Walt Whitman's house, we wandered in. It was raining. It was freezing cold. It was just that miserable New York weather that you get in February when it just is too cold to snow and too miserable to stand outside. And I stood inside and I looked at all these guitars and I played one after the other. And when I finally found one that was really playing, and I just continued playing it for about 20 minutes. And my dad, despite what I anticipated, was not telling me to stop. And then finally I went to go reach and put it back up on the guitar hanger. And my father told me, "Is that the one that you would take home?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he said, "Okay." And he just walked away from me. And when he walked up to the front counter, where they had the bench and all the guys who sit there and talk about what they could have done, he simply pointed and said, "We're buying that," and handed a wad of bills over to the attendant. I couldn't believe it. And when I got back to the house, my mom was waiting with a disposable camera, a big smile on her face, and a cigarette sticking out of her. Yeah, so obviously the Fender Stratocaster holds such a particular place in my heart that it's very hard to replicate. Now, that guitar, unfortunately, was stolen. And the reason my mom didn't go with me to the shop was because she was in a wheelchair, and getting in and out of the car was very difficult. And unfortunately, now Mom has passed as well. This is me trying one last time to replicate that guitar so that I can have it again.
I've built about 30 or 40 Strats over the last 20 years, and this is as close as I've gotten. So if you're wondering why I'm being so particular, or if you're wondering why I am spending all of this time and all this effort to make this particular guitar look such a certain way and feel such a certain way, maybe at least you can understand that story. Because every single one of us has got that first guitar that either we still have, or maybe regrettably we didn't have. Maybe we needed money, or maybe it was lifted, or maybe somebody borrowed it, or it was broken. But when it all shakes out, you know, if you could have a chance to recreate that first guitar that you ever had, I get the feeling, like me, you probably would give it a go. Okay, we're actually going to go ahead and stop sanding right there. And the reason that we're going to stop sanding right there is we've actually hit our desired result, which is that we have a good scuffed surface where we will have appropriate adhesion between the body and the incoming black nitrocellulose paint. Now, you might be looking at me funny because you're sitting there and you're saying you've got half green under there, you've got half clear under there, you've got greens that are slightly tinted by different lacquers. Why not get rid of all the green? Well, the reason is that we're actually going to emulate Fender's newer custom shop tendency, which is to replicate a factory respray. That is a guitar that was sprayed one color, but because color trends were so rapidly evolving between 1959 and 1979, is that guitars that were manufactured, say, a year or two before, or a body at Fender that was manufactured 2 or 3 years before, no longer might have been wearing a very desirable color. For instance, there were quite a few guitars that in 60, 61 might have been sprayed a 3-color sunburst with a heightened red, and then by 1965, those colors were not as popular. Lake Placid Blue was huge, Candy Apple Red, Straight Black. You had a lot of metallic colors that were coming about because by the mid-1960s, those colors were everywhere. They were on every car on the road, and of course they were on half the appliances that you could buy, and naturally they found their way onto guitars. So we are going to emulate that. We are going to emulate a Sherwood green under a black. And the reason is because this is supposed to be a bargain shelf 67, 68 Fender Strat that was thrown together for an order that needed to be expedited. So we are actually going in reverse. Sherwood green is a color that was monumentally popular in 1965, but by 1968, 1969 was falling out of vogue, and a lot of musicians were going back to black. So that's what we're going to be doing, and that is why we have not broken it all the way down to clear. If all goes well and all goes to plan, when we do the aging on this, very, very light aging, a bit of check and some light wear points, we'll have some very interesting reveals as the black gives up and you start to see the Sherwood green come through from underneath, become very brilliant, and then give way to the wood grain. It adds a lot of interesting depth. Now, before you guys get to painting, here's a neat little trick that I learned. In case you don't actually have a body mount, is we're going to take a couple screws that I had in a little bin. I buy little bargain screw sets, local hardware store down the street. And then what we're going to do is we are just going to lightly drop them into a couple of different positions. And what this is going to do is it means that as long as you're not touching any contact areas that are visible, so you can touch underneath where the thick line is and everything like that, if you're careful, you can flip the body back and forth and have it rest on these screws instead of on a surface, and this way you can shoot both sides and have the guitar dry without contact with itself.
Now the plane comes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Actually got it that time. Now the dog is barking. All right, I'm gonna invest more microphones later on so that you guys can actually hear what I'm saying. There are planes and dogs everywhere. Planes and dogs. So we're gonna talk about flash times. Now that there's a fighter jet going overhead. Okay, dude, so let's talk about flash times because we didn't talk about that last time. So on a typical day like today, which in Southern California it's approximately 62 degrees outside, it is not sunny out. So not exactly the frozen tundra, but on a day like today, you're looking at about 8 to 10 minutes between flash times. This stuff actually kicks off really fast. And believe it or not, I did an isolation coat with some clear neck amber yesterday, and 3 hours later it was wet sanding, and when it was wet sanding with 600 and 800, and it wasn't coming up the paper at all. And just in time is another fighter jet. Come move to San Diego, folks, where you will never sleep because there are planes over your head all the time. Just buy a house in Milwaukee. Cheap old houses. Hashtag.
Okay, so we lucked out, and as it would have it, the temperature was perfect and the surface did flatten out as it dried. This is literally 6 hours after shooting it, and I'm already wet sanding it with 400 and then moving up to 600 grit. Now, when you're first starting, you're not really trying to get it perfect by any means. You're creating a lot of scratches, and that's really scary when you're on a darker color. Dark colors have a higher rate of reflectivity, and what this means is that if the surface is imperfect, you will have almost no depth at all, and it will look like a chalkboard. That is a little unsettling when you're starting to sand. So what you have to do is you start off with 400 to knock the huge peaks off, move it up to 6, move it up to 8, and just constantly step it up. Where I'm really making headway here is going from 1000 grit to 1500 grit to 2000 grit to 2500 grit. I was going to take it up to 3000 grit wet dry, but this is a closet classic. It is supposed to have some light swirl marks on the top. We're not looking for perfect glass, as we had mentioned in the previous video in episode 1, where we were finishing the neck. So we're going to be going 400, 600, 800, 1000, 1500 grit, 2000 grit, 2500 grit, and then we are going to stop there. Now, something interesting that you can do when you start sanding at this point is, as you start to recognize the portions of the guitar that you want to create wear patterns in, now is the time to actually put them in. When you do try to sand those wear patterns in, you should be using nothing more excessive than 600 grit. You should be doing it at a stage where you're sanding the rest of the guitar with 600 grit. You should not be adding your wear patterns later on, and here's the reason why. When you're adding the wear patterns later on, you're going to create a lot of scratch marks in the finish that with black, with the heightened reflectivity of black, are going to be very, very evident, and that's going to be the dead giveaway that this guitar is not, in fact, aged naturally, that it has been, that the age has been synthesized. So what you want to do is you're going to actually add your wear patterns, as you can see that I'm doing here in the video, before, but only just lightly. Get it to the point where the paint just starts to peek through, and then leave it alone. Because you've got to remember, you still got a lot of steps left for this thing to get totally smoothed out. So if you go too aggressive on the wear, you will not be able to go backward. You will only watch that wear pattern become larger and larger until it just becomes an issue. So keep that in the back of your head. Now, for our compound, we're actually using automotive compound. We're using Maguire's compound and polish. It's a slightly more aggressive polish than any guitar polishes that you would get. Most guitar polishes are basically like a finishing polish. This polish is great because this is designed to knock height off of finishes and give you a good glassy surface. It is resin-based, so you will notice some shine that gives up after a few weeks. Well, on your car anyway, when it's in the rain. When it's on the guitar, it'll last about 6 months. Now, I'm not saying that this will be dull in 6 months, but I'm saying that you'll see slightly more swirl marks and all that sort of stuff. So just hitting it every couple of months is what you would need to do if you wanted a perfect glass surface. But if you're like me and you want to kind of see the grain, you know, exhaling, for lack of a better term, through the paint as you're playing it and kind of watching the paint get a bit of a texture, that nitro texture where you can still see a bit of the pores like you see on a Gibson or on the headstock of an old Tele, then definitely do what we're doing here, which is hit it hard with the Maguires a couple different times. Don't go chasing the swirl marks too excessively. And once you get up to about 2,000 to 2,500, you're really going to start to see the depth of the black come on back. Guys, so we're actually done with sanding for right now, and we're actually done with buffing right now, so you can take all that stuff and put it to the side. What we're going to start to get into is the light aging. We're just going to lightly lean on this one so that the neck and the body have a consistent kind of aesthetic between the two of them. Okay, you guys, so we're on to the next step, and lucky for you, the next step is actually pretty simple, and it just involves your freezer. And we're just going to stick this guy in the fridge. And there you go. Most expensive piece of equipment. Okay, we are back. It's been about 2.5 hours. We're going to go ahead and check and see how this is working out. Yay. If we left well enough alone right now, we would have a problem in the fact that the neck looks like a very different age than the body of the guitar. So let's go ahead and get to the light aging. I'm going to show you some stuff, and you're probably going to cringe, but, you know, just remember, it's like Bob Ross. You know, you're putting in happy little trees, and every once in a while you're going to look at it and say that tree was a horrific mistake and a complete abomination against nature, but have faith in yourself. And while you have faith in yourself, do like I do and take a knife and start damaging a completely worthwhile and brand new guitar finish. Okay, so we've got it out. We can see that we've started to have a bit of checking starting to take place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a couple of different things that you can do. If you look right here, and you look right there, you'll see 2 small knocks that I've made. And we're actually going to get a little further into this in episode 3, but just to get started, I'm going to show you how to do this. For this particular task, you should have a knife, and you want a blunt blade. You want the blade to be as blunt as is possible. And the reason is that if you have a sharp blade, when you actually go to knock a piece out, it will cut the finish, and it'll give you a finish that's too clean. So what you want to do is you want to actually crumble the finish using the blade. So you're going to lay it flat, kind of dig in right there, and then slightly turn and allow the finish to crumble away. Now, this is zoomed in, so this spot is very small, but it's better to have too many very small spots versus seldom few very big spots. So you're just gonna, there you go, you see how it crumbles off? That's what you want. Now, I've done a couple of these and kind of worked them around. You're going to be working them into areas of high traffic. So that means that you're going to be putting them in areas where you have a lot of abuse. This particular area, the top ridge of the elbow, so to speak, is actually, you know, definitely a high stress area. You're going to have a lot of contact here. Obviously, we've got the wear here, the standard wear, but you're also going to have bumps and bruises from people putting things down and all that sort of stuff, especially also on the bottom. This is why I've actually worn this a little bit more. Right here, if you look where the lower horn is, you'll see a wear here, and you'll see 2 or 3 knocks, but then you start to see this, And this is something that I've seen on Stratocasters and Telecasters, because the original equipment Strats were wide, and the original, well, still to this day, the Telecaster is very wide and has a very hard edge. So I've seen quite a few people would actually, back in the day, stand their guitar up on its end, a lot like this, and kind of just leave it resting against something. So when they would do that, after quite a few years, you would start to have damage start to show up right there.
Hey you guys, so that's the end of episode 2 right there. If you haven't seen episode 1, go ahead and click on that. It'll be over there, or maybe down there. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere. Click on that and watch it. It's got some very insightful stuff, and it does show you a neat trick about grinding up pencil graphite to work with checking and nitrocellulose finishes. Now, before you guys leave, I did want to address one thing. I did have somebody ask, can I do this over poly? Yes, you can shoot nitro over poly. There won't be any reaction. The only thing that I've noticed is that that's basically what the late to mid-70s Fenders were. They had something called Fuller Blast, which was an almost poly clear in which nitro was shot over it. And in those cases, you see wear and the wear down to the clear, but then it just kind of stays there. So you can shoot nitro over poly if you wanted to. You would just need to scuff it. In this case, this particular Sherwood Green Strat was already nitro. It was nitro where the clear was shot a little too heavy and the clear wouldn't let out. And it kind of made it look weird. It looked like a Fuller Blast Strat. It didn't look the way I wanted it to look. Obviously, we're remedying that. So if you haven't seen episode 1, go ahead and tune in on that one. And next week, we are going to be doing the last episode where we're going to be working with the pick guard a little bit, doing a full setup, doing a full restring, adjusting the truss rod, making sure that it's good to go. Remember, this guitar is kind of one of my 2 go-tos. I have my really old Tele, and then I have my now really old Strat. Those are my 2 go-tos that I use all the time. So we will talk about how to prep them and everything like that. In the meantime, do enjoy your day. Have a beautiful day out, whether it's raining or snowing or cold or whatever. You've got a guitar in your house. You should go play it. That'll make the day even better. So I will see you guys. This is B. Riley. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram if you want to read short stories or maybe short reviews of guitars that find their way into print but not into video. These videos do take a while to put together, especially the editing. So I will see you. Have a beautiful day, and we'll catch you next time.